To most sports fans, finishing the regular season with the best overall record sounds like an honour, but to NHL fans, this title has more complex connotations. The President's Trophy curse is a strong superstition among fans across the National Hockey League. But is it really true that finishing top of the standings with the best record means failure in the postseason? Let's find out. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Victoria and I talk all things Toronto sports, hockey and baseball from across the pond in Scotland, and for today's video we're talking about the President's Trophy curse. Does it exist? Is it a myth? Which is it? Before we get started, make sure to like this video for more content like this and also subscribe if you haven't already. And I'm going to apologise in advance for how my throat sounds because I got COVID. Even though I'm okay now, my throat still sounds kind of funny. So that's why. I apologise for that, but there's nothing I can do. So let's dive in, shall we? Superstitions are just such a big thing in the sports world, and while hockey is arguably not as riddled with superstitions as other major league sports, it still has its fair share. Baseball and basketball especially have got the most amount of superstitions, and I would say they're the sports that are most closely associated with being superstitious, but hockey and the NHL still have a lot of superstitions, and there's still a lot of things that both fans and players believe in. Players have playoff beards, not touching trophies, game day routines. Goalies are just a whole different level. They tap the post in a specific way, and in the case of Patrick Roy, even sometimes they talk to the posts. Fans, meanwhile, have lucky seats, lucky game day outfits, and often belief in things such as the curse of the President's Trophy. In 1986, the NHL introduced a new award for the team with the best regular season record, the President's Trophy. The first recipients were the Wayne Gretzky-led Edmonton Oilers, but they themselves couldn't get past the Calgary Flames in the second round and they bowed out of the playoffs in a 7-game series against them. 4 years into the Cup's existence, the winner of the President's Trophy had won the Cup 50% of the time, but then things started to get a little strange and people began to notice that usually and most likely the team that wins the President's Trophy doesn't go on a cup run or misses out on winning the Stanley Cup. And so there the idea of a curse upon the trophy was born. From 1986 to 2004, just 6 of the 19 teams who won the trophy went on to win the cup, and 2006 onwards in the salary cap era there's only been 2 winners of the Stanley Cup who also won the President's Trophy. So overall, if you're keeping count, that is just 8 teams who have won both the trophy and the Stanley Cup out of an overall 38 teams who have won the President's Trophy. It's only 1 team that's won both in the last decade, and just recently, in the past few years, we've definitely seen a trend with this. Last season, for example, the Boston Bruins were the best team in the NHL. They were outstanding. They were just a really impressive team overall and just so good, and the NHL over the years has obviously increased in skill and speed and difficulty. In my opinion, the game has changed, and so to be a standout team in that very sort of saturated market of good teams is like amazing, and it's a really impressive thing. And the Boston Bruins were definitely that last year, and they were President's Trophy winners. They basically ran away with the league last year, and so everyone had high expectations of them in the postseason. They didn't make it past the first round, and they were knocked out by Florida. Now, to give them credit, of course, Florida went on to be Stanley Cup finalists and lost out to Vegas. So, of course, Florida were no easy task in the postseason. But on the flip side, Florida had a pretty regular season record. There was nothing too impressive about it. And they knocked Boston out in 7 games. So I think everybody had expected Boston to at least go into the second round being that impressive of a regular season team, but they didn't, and so people blamed the curse. Previous season to that, talking of the Florida Panthers, they had a really good season the year before with 122 points, and they scored 340 goals in the year, which is one of the highest scoring teams in NHL history. However, as soon as they entered the postseason, it turned into a complete flop. They were swept in the second round by Tampa, scoring just 3 goals in 4 games, which is quite a jump to go from scoring so highly in the regular season to then barely scoring in the postseason is interesting. especially given it was division rivals as well. So, you know, you'd already had a fair sample size against them during the regular season. So, yeah, another example of where perhaps the President's Trophy curse came into effect. There's also the Washington Capitals. So in both 2016 and 2017, the Washington Capitals won the President's Trophy back-to-back years. However, both years in a row again, they were taken down in the second round by the Pittsburgh Penguins. However, the following year in 2018, they missed out on the President's Trophy. They were just slightly less good in the regular season, and they went on to win the Stanley Cup. So 2 years in a row, won the President's Trophy. 2 years in a row, knocked out in the second round by Pittsburgh. Following year, miss out on the President's Trophy, won the Stanley Cup. You can see why people buy into this. You know, whether you're a superstitious person or not, I do feel like you can surely at least see why people would get this idea in their heads and would sort of put these things together and add it up to a curse. I get it. But is there a more logical reason behind this? Is it more than just a curse? Is there actually some explanation for this? Perhaps. One theory is just that it's the mental blocks and the pressure that can come with having the best season in the NHL. If you've done so well that you've proved that you are the best out of every single team in the NHL, there is definitely an added spotlight on you going into the postseason. There is added pressure. People expect you to do well, and sometimes teams can crumble under that pressure. Sometimes having that extra pressure to perform well and that expectation, because if you are a good team during the regular season but not an amazing team, I feel like there's a lot of hope and excitement among fans, but there's also sort of lower expectations for you because you haven't been outstanding and perfect during the regular season. Whereas if you have been this amazing best overall team, I do think that there's higher expectations for you to perform well in the postseason, and perhaps teams just get some sort of mental block under this pressure and it's too much, and maybe that's why they don't do well in the postseason. That is a more logical and I guess reasonable response rather than blaming it on some supernatural effect, and it is definitely one theory which could make sense. Additionally, there could also be the idea that it's a sort of physical issue. If you've played your entire heart and soul out during the regular season to get to that amazing record, perhaps you've nothing left in the tank by the time you get to the postseason. There could be lingering injuries, there could just be tired bodies just going into the postseason. If you've gone all out in the regular season and you've sort of given everything you can give, players are bound to be tired by the postseason. So physically, maybe they're just exhausted. Maybe they're just exhausted because getting a record like that in the NHL is really tough work, and maybe they kind of gave 100% and now there's just physically they're burnt out and there's nothing left in the postseason. Could be a combination of the two. If you're physically exhausted and there's high expectations on you, that is a recipe for disaster, and that could explain why so few teams go on to win the Stanley Cup after winning the President's Trophy. There is also the idea that perhaps being the best in the regular season just doesn't mean you're the best team to win the Stanley Cup. I've said a million times before that regular season hockey is not postseason hockey, and that's why sometimes it doesn't actually matter who you're matched up against in the first round, because it just turns into a completely different ball game, and the way that postseason hockey is played can be really different to the regular season. You're playing in much shorter series, you've got everything to play for, whereas during the regular season you do have to kind of pace yourself as a team a little. You know, you're also, as I said before, you are tired by the time you get to the postseason, and so some players perhaps aren't performing quite as well. Not to go all Leaf centric on everybody, but obviously the Leafs are quite well known for their star core forward group being really good during the regular season and then getting to the postseason and they don't perform as well. And again, I don't know if that's a sort of more mental or physical issue, but it definitely happens. And so who's to say that that isn't what's happening with these teams that are President's Trophy winners that go in and kind of flop in the playoffs? There's also the counter argument that if it was really cursed, surely nobody would be winning it. It's not like nobody has done this. I think it would have more backing behind it if no team that had won the President's Trophy had gone on to win the Stanley Cup. And even though it does seem to be quite unlikely, I suppose when you sort of break it down a little bit further and you run the numbers on it, I don't know what the numbers are, and if anyone does, I'd love you to let me know. But perhaps the amount of teams that have won both is a perfectly acceptable amount if you crunch the numbers. I'm not too sure, but it's not like nobody's done it before. It's not impossible. And so if it were a curse, would anyone have been able to do it? I don't know. I also found this really interesting quote. I read it in I think it was the Hockey News article, but it was taken from Ian Cooper, who wrote for the Toronto Star back in 2014. He wrote, "Of the 6 President's Trophy winners who made first round exits, 5 have come since the 1993-94 season, when the league changed from a divisional to the conference playoff format. Only once during that time, the 1999 to 2000 St. Louis Blues, was the team in a division that was above average. This shouldn't be surprising. If a team dominates a weak division, its shortcomings should become apparent once it faces stiffer competition from the rest of the conference." And so this could also be a pretty good argument as to what the reasoning is behind the so-called curse. Is that simply in the postseason it shows up, I guess, flaws against harder competition than what can be found in the regular season. And obviously the playoff format changing definitely would have a sort of effect on that, I suppose. I think the problem is, though, Boston and Florida, but also other previous examples kind of show up that sometimes the way that the teams play against each other in the regular season doesn't add up to in the postseason. But I suppose there is still an argument for this, and it could just be a combination of factors. Or perhaps there is just no curse, and perhaps there's no real logical explanation for it, and perhaps it's just luck or unluckiness, I suppose. I'm not sure this is something that you can ever put an exact science to, and it's nothing that there can be one definitive answer to. But hockey is just such a fickle sport sometimes, and there's puck luck, there's how players are feeling on the day. There's just so many factors that play into it, and because it is such a fast-paced, sort of highly physical sport, there's so many just little things that can go wrong really quickly, I think. So maybe we're looking too much into this. Maybe I'm looking too much into it. So overall, I think there's just a combination of factors here. I am quite a superstitious person, and so there is part of me buys into the whole curse idea, and perhaps there is sort of some truth to it. I'm not sure. But I also think that logical explanations can just be that there's a different playoff format, and it's made it in a way that teams sort of can face stiffer competition in the postseason, and it can make it more difficult and show up some flaws. It could also be that players are just physically tired by that point after playing 82 games. To then go into the postseason is quite a toll on the body. Could also be the mental block of the pressure that comes from doing so well in the regular season, high expectations for the postseason. It could be a combination of these things, or it could be a curse. So that is all for today, guys. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you think of the President's Trophy curse? Do you buy into it? Do you subscribe to the idea that it is really cursed? Do you think it's a load of nonsense? Do you think that there are any reasons whatsoever for the difference between teams in the regular season compared to the postseason? Let me know in the comments down below. I want to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Also hit the notification bell to get notifications whenever I upload videos, which I'll be doing lots of this month because it is April. We are going to NHL playoff season. I'm very excited, and probably all my spare time will be taken up either watching hockey, talking about hockey, and also the baseball season has started, and I'm planning some baseball content if anyone out there likes baseball as much as I do. So yeah, make sure to hit the notification bell. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back soon with more hockey chats from across the pond. Bye guys.